Some of my favorite stories are the ones that begin at the end. This is not one of those stories, so I need to start at the beginning. It's still one of my favorites. When I was asked by Artaxis to consider the word industry, it was very challenging. Industry, for example, as a word, does not really have a look or an appearance. And I started to think about the word more critically, so I had to find a definition, and of course I went online. There's a couple useful definitions. I have some in front of me right here. It's an organized economic activity concerned with manufacture. Another definition is a branch of commercial enterprise concerned with the output of a specified product or service. For example, the porn industry. And of course, there's a much more useful and educational opportunity to define the word as meaning diligence. Words matter, particularly whenever we're in an academic setting. The academy requires us to have a capacity with language so that we can communicate and so that we can communicate well amongst one another. I think often we mix up the word industry with having an iconic image that it really does not have. And I'm going to use this moment here with all of you to sort of walk through how I use the word industry as it relates to contemporary art practice. Most days, my capacity for language puts me on par with, say, a 3 or 5-year-old. Every once in a while, I get lucky and I have a capacity for English. I'm not feeling all that lucky today, so I had to look up the exact definition of a noun, phrase, and adjective. I think this is particularly useful in academia, particularly in a critique setting. Often students will say, my work is influenced by industrial aesthetics, or I am really drawn to industry. I think a working definition of noun and adjectives and also the dreaded noun phrase will really help us further understand what it is we're talking about and more accurately identify what it is that's influencing our work. The main thesis or assertion I want to make right now with regard to this diatribe or presentation that I'm forcing you all to witness is something I want to revisit, which I stated earlier. The fact that the word industry, a noun, does not have a singular icon or general appearance from which we may draw upon in a referential way as artists. Therefore, there is no universally applicable appearance we can assign when using the word to describe art. In short, industry does not have a look. I'm sorry, it's true. The automotive industry is another sort of curious example, I think, because so many of our cousins, the designers in the art world, are the very people that create these vehicles. We often think that there's a look to the auto industry when really there isn't. I mean, the polished and sexy lines of an Italian motorcycle like a Ducati really do not share all that much with a DeLorean or a Tucker or I don't even know what kind of car that is. Let's call it a Model T. It's a model something or other. It definitely has a model number. They do all share wheels, though. Maybe that's the appearance of the auto industry. Maybe they're just round. At the risk of sounding completely fatuous or someone who's not taking this task seriously, I do want to kind of shift gears at this moment and talk about some moments where a noun phrase possibly can begin to suggest an aesthetic through a process. So let's transform that into an adjective. You see, the industrial mechanisms that were used to create automobiles, the assembly line, mass production, and now robotics, those are all things that really are starting to become more and more prevalent and more significant in art making today. I questioned whether or not I should include this work, but I think it does sort of support this idea of an industrial aesthetic. Again, different than industry as an aesthetic. Jean-Claude and Christo have found a way to sort of negotiate public art in a way that I think is really sort of important and interesting, and one that should be on the radar of a lot of students in academia today. Their use of materials at a very large scale take on an industrial scope, one that supersedes the individual, one that becomes very suggestive of process through community. An entire sort of factory of people is needed for this. Licensing of the idea, outsourcing, all of these notions, these themes that we often use with industry are now sort of in the spectrum or the arena of the artist. So it's at this moment in time, this intersection of this image in particular by Roxy Payne, where I think we need to pause and we need to really begin to make some definitive sort of adjustments with how we analyze these words that we're using. An industrial process is completely different than industry. However, there are a few artists that I believe are successfully utilizing an industrial process, an appropriation of an aesthetic, the assembly line, mechanization, multiplicity, all of these principles. They're using this in a very, very successful way. Roxy Payne is one of my heroes. He creates these machines that essentially are automated sculpture generators. They're timed to sort of secrete a resin-like material on an assembly belt in very specific time intervals. They're lovely. Marik Akula is another sort of hero of mine. His ability to register notions of multiplicity and commerce, I think, are really sort of arresting, particularly with this piece where he was able to sort of create a micro-macro experience between the individual plate and how it compositionally can be unified with other plates to form an image that we all recognize, which is, a rug or an area rug. And this piece really holds the room together. I think it's a lovely example of a production factory creating an object, using an artist's idea to create a statement about the everyday, the mundane. Another example of Marik Akula's use of industrial practice to generate art is with this piece of hands that are sort of conjoined in some way. It very much sort of calls to question the ubiquitous and anonymous nature of glove making, glove factories. I can't think of anything more repetitive than that experience of dipping a hand into rubber repeatedly over and over again. Yet he's found a way to conjoin these. So these very anonymous hands are now touching one another. I think this is a very, very clever use of an industrial template being used in an artful way to express something it otherwise did not have the capacity to express. So that concludes everything, guys. I had a lot of fun sort of thinking about this word industry and how it's often misused to sort of be a surrogate or stand in for ideas that we have within the arts. I think industrial is a much more appropriate word, and maybe this exercise with this presentation has helped inform your experience with how we navigate words in the studio. Thanks again. Bye-bye.